just do something? Stand there. God teaches us eternal lessons in the midst of everyday life. We can be so busy about the work of God that we miss being with God. Every day we make a choice to either sit at His feet or be busy about our own agenda. With the new year just beginning, which this was done back in January, I encourage you to put aside all those shallow New Year's resolutions that you made and focus on spending time with God. Spending time with Him is more important than being busy for Him. Ask yourself, are you a devoted servant? Read Luke 10, verse 39. Mary was a devoted servant. Now, you've just read how totally devoted Mary was to Jesus. Mary hung on every word. She wanted to hear everything Jesus was saying. She wanted to learn everything she could learn from Him. Now read John 11, verses 28 through 34. And it says Mary ran to meet Jesus when she heard Jesus was asking for her. Do you run to meet God when He calls you? Or do you procrastinate and take your time and even ignore Him at the moment? Read John chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Mary anointed or washed Jesus' feet with the most expensive perfume because nothing was too good for Him. Do you feel the same way that Mary did? Nothing is too good for God. Do you sit at His feet listening to every word He speaks to you? Do you soak in every word God says to you? Do you give everything to God because nothing is too good for Him? These are all questions I want you to ponder this week and today. Are you a busy servant? Read Luke chapter 10, verse 40. Talks about Martha. Martha was a busy servant. Martha was more concerned with going about her chores and preparations than she was sitting at Jesus' feet, spending time with Him. Martha was always distracted with preparations that had to be made, daily chores, preparing the way for Jesus. Martha was always sweating the small stuff and not seeing the overall big picture. Martha resented Mary for Mary's lack of attention of the small stuff, the preparations, the daily chores, and working to prepare the way for Jesus. Are you a Mary or are you a Martha? Ask yourself. Reread those scriptures I gave you, and then ask yourself again, are you a Mary or a Martha? Sometimes we become so focused on our own agenda that we lose sight or don't even see God's plan for us, especially for that day. We can become so busy doing things for God, or even for ourselves, we miss being with God, listening to Him and learning what His plans for us really are. We don't want to become as the Pharisees and become so consumed with the preparations and doings that we forget to have a relationship with God. So if you read Luke 10:41, what do we do with God? What we do with God is far more important than what we do for God. Let me say that again. What we do with God is way far more important than what we do for God. God only wants one thing from us, and that is fellowship and communication with Him. Our number one priority should always be stop, be still, and seek Him. Reminds me of kindergarten when they taught us stop, drop, and roll. Well, it's stop, be still, and seek Him. So again, are you a Mary or a Martha? Here's your homework. I want you to answer these questions. Are you a Mary or a Martha? Why? What makes you think that? If you're a Martha, what can you do to change that and become more like Mary? Are you choosing what you think you need to do for God's sake? Let me read that again. Are you choosing what you think you need to do for God's sake? Read Psalms 46:10. Things to consider and think about for the month. Stop. Slow down or stop all the activity and choose to slow down and set some time aside to be still before God. Be still. Still in attention. Find a place to be alone and sit with God, listening to His voice and His word. Allow Him to speak to your heart. Seek Him. Open your heart to Him in honest prayer, worship, and communion with Him. What are you busy with that might interfere with your time with God? What choices do you need to make in order to experience the intimacy with God that He wants to have with you? And how can others help keep you accountable in those choices? Pray this. Dear Savior, at whose feet I now sit, when you knock on the door to my heart, what is it you're looking for? What is it you want? Is it not to come in to dine with me? Is it not for fellowship? And yet so often, where do you find me? At your feet? No, in the kitchen. How many times have I become distracted and left you there, sitting, waiting, longing? What is so important about my kitchen, full of preparations, that draws me away from you? How can they seem so trivial now, and yet so urgent when I'm caught up in them? Forgive me for being so distracted by my preparations, and so little attracted by your presence. For being so diligent in my duties, and so negligent in my devotion. For being so quick to my feet, and so slow to yours. Help me to understand that it's an intimate moment you seek from me, not an elaborate meal. Amen. Your memory verse is Luke 10:41 and 42. Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much and getting yourself worked up over nothing. One thing only is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course, and won't be taken from her. Have a blessed day.